Let's find the dimension of this shape. So I know that I'm dealing with a rectangle here, and I know that the area of the rectangle is 36 square inches. And I also know that the length of the rectangle is equal to x plus 5, and the width of the rectangle is equal to x. Well, how does that help me? Well, if you remember from geometry, the area of a rectangle is simply equal to the length times the width. Okay, so in this situation, let's fill in what we know. We know that 36 is the area, and that's equal to my length, which is x plus 5, times my width, which is x. Okay, so if I'm trying to solve for the dimensions of this shape, what I really need to do is I really need to find x. If I find x, it's going to help me figure out the dimensions of the shape. So I need to find x. Let's go ahead and let's do that in purple. So I have 36 equals x plus 5 times x. Well, what do we do here? Maybe let's try expanding this operation. And I have 36 equals, this is going to be x squared plus 5x. All right, so if I subtract this 36 here, I subtract 36 to both sides, I'm going to get x squared plus 5x minus 36. And since I subtracted 36 from both sides, it's just going to be equal to 0. All I did was I wrote this side over here on this side for simplicity's sake. Well, if I want to solve for x here, what I have to do is I have to factor this in order to find the roots of x. So if I factor this, what are my two numbers that add up to get me 5, but multiply to get me negative 36? Well, if I think about it, the two factors of 36, let's go through the list. I have 1 and 36. I have 2 and that would be 18. I have 3 and 12. Let's see, are there any 4? Yeah, I have 4 and 9 multiply to get me 36, and then I have 6 and 6. So I can see here that there is one combination here that could somehow possibly add up to get me 5. And it has to be a negative 36, so one of these two numbers needs to be negative when they're added together or multiplied together. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in my x's, and I know it needs to be a 4 and a 9. Well, what number needs to be negative in order to add up to get me 5? Well, if 9 is negative and 4 is positive, let's just look at that. Well, when I FOIL this out, this is going to get me x squared plus 4x minus 9x minus 36. So that works for the negative 36, but it doesn't work for getting me positive 5x because that would actually be negative 5x. So what we're going to do is we're going to need to erase the negative and the positive and flip them. Okay? So it needs to be a negative 4 and a positive 9, which would equal x squared minus 4x plus 9x minus 36. So that is going to get me positive 5x, which this is my correct polynomial. So I have factored this correctly. Now let's get rid of some of this work so I can do what I need to do with it. So now that I have this, I know this is all still equal to 0. Well, now that I'm trying to solve for x, and if some number times some number is equal to 0, what has to be true is at least one of these, at least one, equals is 0, right? Whenever two numbers multiply to get me 0, I know that 0 has to be one of those two numbers. So that means I'm just going to set x minus 4 equal to 0, or x plus 9 is equal to 0. So if I solve for x, I get x equals 4, or x equals negative 9. All right, so I have two answers here. Are both of them right? Are either of them right? Is only one of them right? So in this case, let's look back to our original problem and let's ask ourselves which one of these makes more sense. Well, if x is negative 9, that would leave me with negative 9 plus 5 as my length and negative 9 as my width. Well, there's a problem because negative 9 plus 5 is equal to negative 4, and negative 9 is negative 9. So the difficult thing about this is, in a rectangle example, how could I have negative 9 as its width, and how could I have negative 4 as its length? Can you draw me an example of a rectangle that has a negative 9 inches length? No, you can't. This is a positive distance. I can't have a negative here. So what we want to do is we want to figure out if this x plus 4 is going to work. So let's plug that number in. Let's erase this, get this out of here. Let's plug in x equals 4 and see if that works for our situation. So 4 plus 5, that's going to give me 9, and then I have 4 here for my width. So if my area was the length times width and it was 9 times 4, that means that it would be 36 inches squared, which is my original answer. So that means my dimensions are the length is equal to 9, and my width is equal to 4. All right, so given what we have about this shape, this is the length and the width. We had to factor this polynomial here to get my two possible answers for x, and then we checked them, found out that negative 9 did not work and 4 did work for our practical example.